Germany, July 1944. The war was turning against the Third Reich. The once invincible Nazi army was collapsing on all fronts. In the east, Soviet forces pushed relentlessly toward Berlin. In the west, the Allies had landed in Normandy and were breaking through France. For the first time in the war, even Hitler's most loyal generals knew the truth. Germany was doomed. But inside the crumbling heart of the Nazi regime, a group of officers, politicians and intellectuals decided to act. They were not foreign spies or resistance fighters. They were Germans, men of rank and honor, who believed their duty was not to obey Hitler but to stop him. Their plan was called Operation Valkyrie. The origins of Valkyrie go back to late 1943. By then, Germany's situation was desperate. The Allies bombed cities daily. The Eastern Front consumed hundreds of thousands of lives, and morale among soldiers was sinking fast. Hitler, isolated in his headquarters known as the Wolf's Lair, refused to listen to reason. Anyone who questioned him was dismissed, imprisoned or executed. Among the officers of the German army, quiet conversations began to spread. Talk of ending the war by ending Hitler's rule. Some wanted peace for moral reasons, horrified by the regime's crimes. Others simply feared that Hitler's madness would destroy the nation entirely. Together, they formed what history would remember as the German resistance. At the center of it all was a man named Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg, a colonel in the Wehrmacht, brilliant, patriotic, and deeply religious. He had once admired Hitler, believing he would restore Germany's dignity after World War I. But by 1942, after witnessing atrocities in the East and the senseless slaughter of German soldiers, Stauffenberg turned against him. A devastating injury in North Africa left him with one eye, one hand and only 3 fingers on the other. Yet from that moment on, Stauffenberg became the face of the conspiracy. The plan to overthrow Hitler had existed for years in fragments, but it lacked something vital: access. Stauffenberg, newly appointed as Chief of Staff of the Army Reserve, now had exactly that. He attended high-level briefings at Hitler's headquarters. He could meet the Führer personally, and he had access to an emergency national defense plan, Operation Valkyrie. Originally, Operation Valkyrie was designed by the German military as a contingency plan to secure order if communication with Hitler was lost, for example, in case of civil unrest or a coup. It gave the replacement army power to seize control of Berlin and key government buildings. Stauffenberg and his allies realized they could use this plan, not to defend Hitler, but to destroy his regime. They would modify Valkyrie's orders, replace loyal SS commanders with resistance officers, and launch a coup the moment Hitler was dead. But that was the catch. Hitler had to die first. The conspirators included some of Germany's most respected figures: General Ludwig Beck, a former chief of staff who resigned in protest years earlier, Karl Goerdeler, the former mayor of Leipzig, and many others, lawyers, priests, and officers who still called themselves patriots. Their meetings took place in secret apartments, churches, and army offices across Berlin. Every conversation could mean death if discovered. The Gestapo had spies everywhere. The plan was clear. Stauffenberg would personally deliver a bomb to Hitler's daily briefing. Once the explosion confirmed the Führer's death, Operation Valkyrie would be activated. Troops loyal to the conspirators would arrest key Nazi leaders, Himmler, Goebbels, Göring, and take control of Berlin. The new provisional government would negotiate peace with the Allies. It was bold. It was dangerous. And it had to be perfect. The first opportunity came in early July 1944, but the meeting was cancelled. Then again on July 15th, the bomb was placed, but Hitler left the room early. Each failure increased the risk of discovery. Finally, on July 20th, 1944, Stauffenberg received word that Hitler would hold a briefing at his East Prussian headquarters, the Wolf's Lair. It would be attended by senior officers and staff, the perfect chance. That morning, Stauffenberg boarded a plane to Rastenburg, carrying a briefcase with 2 British-made explosives hidden inside. He was calm but pale. He told his adjutant Werner von Haeften, "This must be done, even if it costs my life." Inside the Wolf's Lair, the heat was suffocating. The conference room was a long wooden hut, filled with officers' maps and the smell of fuel and sweat. Hitler stood at the center, leaning over a map of the Eastern Front. At 12:30 p.m., Stauffenberg placed his briefcase under the table near Hitler and quietly excused himself, pretending to take a phone call. Moments later, the room exploded. The blast tore through the wooden walls, shattering windows and throwing officers to the ground. Smoke filled the air. Screams echoed. Bodies lay twisted amid the wreckage. Stauffenberg, waiting outside, saw the flames rise and heard the chaos. Convinced Hitler was dead, he and Haifton jumped into a car, raced to the airfield, and flew back to Berlin to launch Valkyrie. But inside the bunker, fate had intervened. Moments before the explosion, an officer had moved the briefcase slightly behind a thick wooden table leg, shielding Hitler from the full force. 4 officers were killed, but Hitler survived, his eardrums shattered, his trousers torn, his hair singed. He staggered out of the ruins, furious, alive. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Stauffenberg arrived and declared, "The Führer is dead." The coup began. Communications were seized, orders were sent to arrest SS leaders, and troops began occupying government buildings. For a few hours, it seemed to work. Telephones rang non-stop, officers barked commands, and the resistance believed they had finally succeeded. But by evening, confusion spread. Hitler's voice was heard on the radio. He was alive, the coup collapsed. Loyalists retook control of Berlin. By midnight, Stauffenberg and his closest allies were surrounded at the Bendler Block, the army headquarters. Realizing the plan had failed, they made a final stand. Stauffenberg shouted, "Long live Holy Germany," as he was executed by firing squad. The time was 12:45 a.m., July 21, 1944. Over the next weeks, the Gestapo unleashed brutal retribution. More than 7,000 people were arrested. About 200 were executed. Many hung with piano wire in the cellars of the Plötzensee prison. Hitler had the executions filmed for his personal viewing, but what the conspirators failed to achieve in life, they achieved in death. They proved that not all Germans followed blindly. That even within the heart of tyranny, conscience could survive. After the war, Claus von Stauffenberg became a symbol of moral resistance. For decades, his story divided Germany. Some saw him as a traitor, others as a hero. But history eventually gave him justice. Today, the courtyard of the Bendler Block where he fell is a national memorial. Each year, soldiers of the Bundeswehr, the modern German army, swear their oaths of service there. Not to a ruler, but to the Constitution. Operation Valkyrie failed to end the war, but it succeeded in something far greater. It showed that even in the darkest hour of human history, there were those who dared to say no, men who risked everything to stop a tyrant. And though their bomb failed to kill him, their courage helped redeem a nation. You've been watching WW2 War Files. Subscribe and open the next classified file from history's deadliest war.